Now, on to the show, right? What you're here for. Today we welcome David and Sharon Beckman and Jeff Savage to the symposium. David and Sharon live here in Santa Rosa. David is a popular and talented playwright and poet. You may remember Sharon when she introduced Francesco Licce Chong, the Santa Rosa Symphony conductor, a few weeks ago here at Symposium. And Sharon is on that symphony board where she does an incredible job. Now, we have to talk about this, right, Jeff? Jeff Savage taught transcendental meditation for 50 years and loves to drive his tractor, and he does property art appraisals also. Okay, so not to belabor the point, I'd like to bring you all up here and let's talk about Walt Whitman.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. And is this working? Testing. Testing.
Keep testing.
Testing.
There.
So welcome. Thank you all for coming. Our reading today is called Walt Whitman, the Man and His Poetry. I'm David Beckman.
And I'm Sharon Beckman.
And
This sounds a little loud, doesn't it? It doesn't? Oh, okay. All right.
And I'm Jeff Savage.
I'm a playwright, poet, and sometime actor.
And I'm the wife of a playwright, poet, and sometimes actor.
And I'm the son-in-law. No. And I'm an actor with credits in both classical and modern plays, including 4 of David's.
This morning, it is our pleasure to bring you up close to the poet Walt Whitman, his life and work.
So we invite you to travel back now 169 years to Brooklyn, New York, a rough and tumble city with a busy waterfront, ferry boats crossing the East River to Manhattan, and people arriving daily from everywhere to start new lives.
If you lived in Brooklyn in 1855 and you were very, very lucky, you might have come across this 95-page self-published book in a green cover with gold embossing and the title, Leaves of Grass, but no author's name.
Only on the flyleaf, a picture of a jaunty-looking, bearded, middle-aged man in a white shirt and black trimmed hat.
When you opened this curiosity, you would read opening lines of what might be taken for a poem, but unlike anything you'd ever read.
I celebrate myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at ease, observing a spear of summer grass.
Would you have read on? How could you not?
Houses and rooms are full of perfumes. The shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe the fragrance myself and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it.
What's this? Casual, personal, unrhymed lines of strange sights and smells?
The atmosphere is not a perfume. It has no tastes of the distillation. It is odorless. It is for my mouth forever, and I am in love with it. I will go to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me.
Mad? Who's mad? Who wrote this anyway? You'd search in vain for the author, for the title page says merely, Leaves of Grass, Brooklyn, New York, 1855. Read more? Well?
A few light kisses, a few embraces, a reaching round of arms, the play of sun and shade on the trees, the delight alone, or in the rush of the streets, or along the fields and hillsides, the feeling of health, the full noon trill, the song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun.
Really? To answer the riddle of authorship, you'd have to get all the way to page 29, where this passage appears out of nowhere.
Walt Whitman, an American, one of the roughs, a cosmos, disorderly, fleshy, and sensual, eating, drinking, and breeding. No sentimentalist, no stander above men and women or apart from them. No more modest than immodest.
And then this series of bombshells.
Unscrew the locks from the doors. Unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. Through me, many long, dumb voices, voices of slaves and prostitutes and of deformed persons, voices of diseased and despairing, and of these and dwarves, of the trivial and flat and foolish and despised, of fog in the air and beetles rolling balls of dung.
Excuse me, balls of dung in poetry?
Oh, yes.
And through me, forbidden voices, voices of sexes and lusts, voices indecent by me clarified and transfigured.
By now you've realized that this was a book to be hidden from the children and their parents and teachers and clergy and old Aunt Gretchen in her drawing room serving tea.
And above all, in the age of Longfellow and Emerson, when poetry was decent, moral, high-toned, and respectable, who is this mad creature, this Walt Whitman?
Walter Whitman Jr. was born, the second of 9 children, into a working family in the blue-collar town of Huntington, Long Island, in 1819. His father, Walter Sr., was an often bitter, struggling carpenter and house builder. His mother, Louisa Van Velser, a Quaker.
By the time he published his book, Walt was a 35-year-old, bearded, rough-hewn man in working men's clothes who dropped out of the school at age 11 to learn the typesetting trade.
This and on and off journalism had kept him going for years, either traveling by barge and public carriage or living under his parents' roof, or I should say roofs. His father had the dicey habit of building a house, moving his family into it, then selling it out from under them and starting all over a few blocks or miles away, usually in Brooklyn.
Just to complicate things, his father loved books, knew Shakespeare, was a political radical, had befriended Tom Paine in his youth, yet had no time for Walt's supposed poetry.
Still, all this time, Walt kept notebooks and journals where he entered in pencil thoughts, impressions, and yes, poems in long, many-syllable lines. He seemed to have a conviction that one day, perhaps many, would read his poems.
One thing Walt had was complete self-belief. Where did he get it? No male in his family showed this quality, but his mother, just maybe.
I believe in you, my soul, but I not abase myself to you, and you must not be abased to any other. Loaf with me on the grass, loose the stop from your throat. Not words, not music or rhyme I want, not custom or lecture, not even the best. Only the lull I like, the hum of your valved voice.
Over time, Whitman gathered his poems into a manuscript and made a stab here and there at getting them published, to no avail.
So, being a typesetter, he thought, why not? He typeset his poems at a Brooklyn print shop and ran off 750 copies.
A few sold, and he gave many away, and the huge, immeasurable history-making Anne sent one to not just anyone, but the luminary of the day, the Boston Brahmin, poet and essayist, Ralph Waldo Emerson.
It'd be like one of us sending a self-published book to a combination of Billy Collins, Dana Gioia, and maybe Oprah Winfrey. Add the fact that at this point, American literature emanated from the precincts of Harvard and pretty much looked eastward to Europe for models. It was the era of the Romantic poets, Keats, Shelley, Wordsworth. Walt Whitman may as well have been from another planet.
Yet in Emerson, Walt chose well. For all his breeding, he was a man able to see beyond what was fashionable and proper in poetry.
After 1 month, Walt received a letter from Emerson where he now famously said, "Congratulations, you are the poet America has been waiting for, and I welcome you at the beginning of a wonderful career." A miracle. An American man of letters, of the establishment, who could see past his own sensibilities, even his own time, and recognize authenticity and the very fire of radical originality.
Emerson's endorsement hit Walt Whitman like a thunderbolt, affirmed that he had not wasted breath and energy. He carried this letter with him everywhere, showed it to his bohemian friends in Manhattan, carried it on his person for years after.
Besides the exotic structure and language of his poem, of course, the subject matter was unheard of, specifically the body. Whitman seemed to have no inhibitions and wrote, "I am the poet of the body as well as the mind." Sexuality and sensuality were as natural to him as breathing. In this, he was years, decades, a century ahead of readers and writers.
I mind how once we lay in June, how you settled your head athwart my hips and gently turned over upon me, and parted the shirt from my bosom bone, and plunged your tongue into my bare, stripped heart, and reached till you felt my beard, and reached till you held my feet.
For Walt, it wasn't just the body, of course, no. His great insight and bone-deep conviction, so modern, so unpuritanical, was that the body, mind, and soul are one, all to be revered, each, yes, holy. In fact, there was very little that wasn't holy.
Swiftly arose and spread around me the peace and knowledge that pass all the argument of the earth. And I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own.
And that all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers. And that a kelson of the creation is love, and limitless are leaves stiff or drooping in the fields.
And brown ants in the little wells beneath them, and mossy scabs of the worm fence, heaped stones, elder, mullein, and pokeweed.
A child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than she. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven.
Or, I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrancer purposely dropped, bearing the owner's name some way in the corners, that we may see and remark and say, whose?
Or I guess the grass is itself the child, the produced babe of vegetation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic, sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones.
Growing among black folks as among white, Canuck, Tuckahoe, Congressman, Cuff, I give them the same. I receive them the same. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves.
Thank you, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Thank you for seeing how words on the page, so obviously not your own, constitute the eternally and viscerally true, and more, a whole new American voice.
Flying high with affirmation and optimism, more sure than ever what he was about, Walt Whitman had taken to crossing to Manhattan some days and nights, hanging out in bohemian haunts, emerging as a known character, strolling Broadway, seen in taverns, theaters, and the opera, with a floppy hat and Byronic collar, the poet emerging into his own.
Yet, for all that, he was still earthbound and still a product of his family. Indeed, still living in his father's house.
Walt's oldest brother, Jesse, was nasty, jealous, violent, a constant threat to the other siblings, and a chip off the old block. Walt Whitman Sr., plagued by a recent stroke, was a terrible father, punitive, angry, intolerant, especially of Walt. Among the siblings, Andrew, weak and tubercular, and Hannah, unstable, dependent, and of poor judgment. Another sister, though, Mary, understood Walt and loved him from a distance. But holding the family together was his mother, Louisa, the Quaker, a woman of spirit, and Walt was sure of soul. He adored and protected her.
Jesse's life ended in an insane asylum. Hannah disappeared into the New York night, probably as a prostitute, not to be heard of again. Mary escaped to a normal life. But then there was the youngest, Ed. Thought to be borderline mad in that primitive time, he was probably merely autistic. Yet his father, in an act of terrible cruelty, had once had him committed to an asylum, leaving Walt to go get him and bring him home. To Walt, Ed was very special, a friend with a great heart and humor that others lacked. Walt roomed with Ed, and they were very close, companions and soulmates.
With all that in mind, we want to turn now to David's play, Becoming Walt Whitman, based on Walt and his family, and set just as he was pulling his manuscript together, fine-tuning it, adding final poems, still hoping that a New York publisher would take it, which of course never happened.
The scene that Jeff and I are about to read, for which Sharon will read stage directions as needed, concerns Walt and Ed.
What you'll detect is that with the playwright's prerogative, David has given Ed a special quality, that of a savant, with a magical feeling for, what else? Words. Is this a leap of faith from the historical Ed? Not at all. Maybe the smallest of steps. Our scene is set in Ed and Walt's bedroom. Walt has just returned from an afternoon in Manhattan. Walt enters the bedroom they share. Ed is in his bed, covering his face. He's been beaten by Jesse.
How are you, Ed?
Suicide.
What?
Suicide on the floor. The pistol near the bed.
Walt crosses to Ed's bed.
Ed,
I don't like it that I was
now
born.
stop that.
The suicide sprawls on the floor, blood on the wall.
Let's play catch cradle. Let's make new thoughts.
New thoughts? I love them. They come down the road on big wheels and I jump on them and ride away.
Walt takes a string from his pocket, makes a cat cradle, offers it to Ed, who takes it, making a new one. Walt takes it. They pass it back and forth.
Take it.
You take it.
Now you.
You,
You tree.
burning bush,
Echo.
rippled words, silky words,
Echo of rippled words, belched words.
sound of silk words, on the wind, respiration and inspiration, dark colored sea rocks, love root,
Terrific, Ed. Love root. Silk thread.
smoke, sniffing, dry leaves, green leaves.
Yes, you're hot today.
Walt fetches a notebook and a pencil and starts writing.
I don't want to miss a word of this.
Walt writes for a moment in silence.
How's this? The smoke of my own breath, echoes, ripples, and buzzed words, love root, silk thread, crotch, and vine.
Yes.
my inspiration and respiration, the sniff of green leaves and dry leaves and of the shore and dark-colored sea rocks.
Hay,
Okay. And of hay in the barn.
belched words.
Walt writes,
The sound of belched words of my voice, words, get this, loosed on the wind. Wait, loosed on the eddies of the wind.
Eddie, Eddie.
Like an Ed, you're just an eddy of the wind.
Ed gets off the bed, jumps up and down. Walt embraces him and they dance around the room.
Eddy of the wind, eddy of the wind.
They dance around the room again, then collapse on the bed laughing. Walt still holds his notebook.
Let me hear.
Hear what?
Let me hear reckoned.
Walt goes to an earlier page.
Have you reckoned 1,000 acres much? Have you reckoned the earth much? Have you practiced so long to learn to read? Have you felt so proud to get at the meaning of poems?
Stop this day.
Stop this day with me and night, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and sun.
Specters.
You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the specters in books.
Not my eyes.
You shall not look through my eyes either, nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides and filter them for yourself.
Ed claps and cheers.
Urge, urge, urge.
Urge and urge and urge, always the procreant urge of the world.
Urge of the world. Urge of the world.
Ed, have I told you about tonight?
No.
I'm going to see a man in Manhattan. I gave him a copy of our poems. If he likes them, he might help me make them into a book for everyone to read.
No.
Ed pushes Walt away.
Stay.
Ed pushes Walt off the bed, then goes into a fetal position.
What's the matter, Ed?
Look after the leaves.
What leaves?
We were coming back from that bad place with bars and locks and rat smells.
You should never have been in there.
But you saved me. You, me, Andrew, in a wagon coming home, and grass grew through rocks near a wall, tough leaves of grass. And with them grew one lone flower, tall and strong.
And
Our wagon wheels just missed the grass and the flower too. They could have been crushed.
nothing crushed them.
Something might.
What?
Brotherly love
Jesse.
wants to kill me.
Walt gets into bed with Ed and rocks him.
Jesse crushes things.
Jesse's not going to hurt you again, I promise you. Oh, did I tell you? Dad is better.
I want to love Dad, but when I'm with him, there's always that other thing there.
What thing?
The green ghost. The one that talks to him over his shoulder and gets him angry and makes him hate our words. He's got big eyes, no hands.
Walt rocks Ed.
We're a family, and we're going to be fine.
Keep me safe.
I will.
Stay with me.
Of course, of course.
Keep me safe. Keep me safe.
Walt continues rocking Ed. End of scene.
There is so much more to Walt's life and his book. He was just getting started. Another brother, George, whom we haven't even mentioned, went to the Civil War in a New York regiment and was badly wounded.
So Walt traveled to a Union hospital in Washington to find him among hundreds of wounded and tend to him, and stayed for 5 years, nursing the Union boys, 17, 18, 19 years old, helping them write letters home, many dying in his arms.
As with so many Americans, Walt found his true hero in President Abraham Lincoln. Indeed, in an early, unpublished essay found years later, Walt predicted that the next president would not be an elite New Englander after all, but a man of the West, self-made, strong, even bearded.
It was said that each morning when Lincoln rode by horseback to the White House from a temporary residence, Whitman would walk along at a distance, and that the two men often tipped hats one to the other. Did Lincoln sense a kindred spirit? Why not? And when Lincoln died, Whitman was bereft, inconsolable, the poet as mourner and witness.
When lilacs last and the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early drooped in the western sky, I mourned, and yet shall mourn with ever returning spring. O powerful fallen western star, O great star disappeared.
His coffin passes through lanes and streets, through day and night, with the great cloud darkening the land, with the tolling bells' perpetual clang. Here, coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac.
After that, Whitman, his health not good, his hair now prematurely white, he was only 46, took to the road, traveled the country, absorbed all of America, all the while adding to his poem.
On journeys through the states we start, I through the world, urged by these songs, sailing henceforth to every land, to every sea. We willing learners of all, teachers of all, lovers of all.
We dwell a while in every city and town. We pass through Canada, the Northeast, the vast valley of the Mississippi, and the southern states. We make trial of ourselves and invite men and women to hear, remember, fear not, be candid, promote the body and the soul, dwell a while and pass on. Be copious, temperate, chaste, magnetic. And what you effuse may then return as the seasons return.
In cabined ships at sea, the boundless blue on every side expanding, with whistling winds and music of the waves, the large, imperious waves. By sailors young and old, haply will I reminisce of the land, be read in full rapport at last.
Later readers have said his poetry here becomes less sharp, more everyday. But did it?
Come, said my soul, such verses for my body let us write, for we are one. Ever with pleased smile I may keep on, ever and ever, yet the verses owning, as first I here and now, singing for body and soul, set them my name.
For Walt, it was always his one book, his Leaves of Grass, his life's narrative, expanded and revised. By the time he dies in 1892, age 73, it has reached 800 pages, was devoured here and in Europe, and he was on his way to becoming a national treasure.
Walt persisted till the end, the rough, the traveler, the lover of men and women, the observer, the one living deeply, seeing all, accepting all, the strong yet tender poet.
Dare we say, the best of America? Even the one we might yearn for now, to see us in all our humanity, to love us, even to make us whole.
I am a free companion. I bivouac by invading watchfires. I understand the large hearts of heroes and non-heroes, the courage of present times and all times.
All this I swallow. It tastes good. I like it well. It becomes mine.
I am the man. I suffered. I was there. And these I feel. all these I am.
David's play ends much earlier with Walt's final leave-taking from Brooklyn and his family. At 35, still unpublished, he knows that he must seek the wider world. Ed holds the handwritten manuscript.
Ed, come with me.
No,
You must.
I leave, I die.
Please, Ed.
With unexpected energy, Ed thrusts the poems to Walt, who takes them.
Not without you.
Ed pushes Walt to the floor.
Go be Walt with words and be us both.
Walt, clutching the manuscript, hesitates, then is resigned.
I depart as air.
Dirt,
I bequeath myself to the dirt.
if you want me.
If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles.
Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged.
Missing one place,
Search another.
I stop.
Stop somewhere.
I stop somewhere, waiting for you.
The end.
Is it time for questions?
Can we do some questions?
Do you have
Sure.
more?
No, we're finished. We'd love to have questions.
Great.
Not that we have many answers, but
Well, theoretically speaking. Let's see. Then we got a couple over on this side over here. Okay, got it. Anybody over here?
So as Walt Whitman added to Leaves of Grass for decades and decades, do you think that it was mainly added to, or that he totally edited as he went what he had already written earlier on?
I'm not sure anybody really knows. He certainly continued to be prolific. And we know that from some of the geographic references of where he was traveling. He had his own personal way of writing, and handwritten manuscripts often, for most of these poems, don't exist anymore. It's just the books. He found a publisher, a good one in Manhattan, eventually, who took him on. Every 3 or 4 years, reissued Leaves of Grass, so it's the last issue is like that big. The one Sharon held up, which is self-published in 1855, is only 90 pages, and that's his early poem. So it's a bit of a mystery how it all worked out, and yet there it is, 800 pages worth.
Could you please, could you kindly tell us something about his travels far and near? And also, is that a first edition?
This is a facsimile,
Oh.
or it would be under lock and key. Yeah, a Whitman Society put this out about 8 or 10 years ago, but it's good. You can see the handset type. In fact, we'll leave it up here if anybody wants to look. I think it's a good reproduction, including the title page, which Sharon referred to. There he is in his hat and his collar. And anyway, the title page and everything else. So that's the way the book looked. There are maybe, out of 750 copies, they think maybe 100 still exist. And they're among the most, along with the early Oxford English Dictionary and various, Shakespeare's First Folio, among the most valuable books among collectors. Linda. Oh, well, a lot of this was pre-railroad. So he traveled by horseback. He traveled by coach. He probably traveled with a few companions, though people don't really know. He was kind of a lone traveler. No, never went overseas. He ended up in New Jersey, outside of Newark, where he built himself a tomb, rather grand one. His ego clicked in at that point. And so that's where he's buried. Interesting story around that. Speaking of Europe, Oscar Wilde, this is 1892, I think. Just before that, came to America famously and toured around. He came to visit Whitman and they spent a day together. So here's this grand fop from England, and the rough-hewn Whitman would sure love to have been a fly on the wall for that one, but they evidently hit it off.
David, over here.
Linda.
Oh yeah, Linda.
What inspired you to write about Walt Whitman?
There's a wonderful book, Walt Whitman, The Making of the Poet, by Paul Zweig, S-W-E-I-G, himself an American poet. And he wrote a short biography. There had been others. The most famous is by Justin Kaplan, 400-page biography. This was 120 pages, 130, and it delved into this exact period. Life in Brooklyn, his siblings, his, what he did. And I just had a flash. I saw it as a play. The plot was already there. So that really helped me a lot. Yeah, I recommend the book, by the way.
David, I'm wondering what inspired you, is right here, Joanne.
Yeah, Joanne. I know.
Oh, hi, Joanne.
Hi. What inspired you or triggered your love for Walt Whitman's poetry, and how long ago was that?
Yeah. Well, I was a literature student in college and 1 year of graduate college. And I loved poetry. I was more taken with the modernists like Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, people like that. But Whitman was always I was aware. I probably studied him some in a class. It wasn't totally devoted to him. But it wasn't until I read this biography, I guess I was ready to see who he really was in American literature. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, okay.
Well,
Next
there's
question.
another-
Yes. The play suggests that Ed was Walt's muse. Is that based in fact, or is that just wonderful artistic license?
Probably a combination. Ed was a very unusual person. People who knew him knew he was. There's a line there, he's probably autistic, borderline, but nobody knew what that was. And Walt and he were very close. They were friends, and among the siblings, they were the two that really got along and knew each other. The character of Ed, this is playwright's prerogative, cried out to me for something extra. And I said, of course, he's, if not a muse, he's kind of helps Walt come up with words. He's kind of a wordsmith in his own right. And so together they write the kind of groundwork for a lot of these poems. Did that happen historically? I hope nobody ever finds out it didn't happen. But yeah.
It happened in your mind.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Do we have
We
any?
do.
Okay, cool.
What happened to Ed when he left? When Walt
Nothing
left?
good. Jesse was not out of the house yet. He remained very violent toward Ed. Nobody was there to protect him. He died at a fairly early age, probably by 40. Never left that house. As he said, I leave, I die. He did not have what it took to go out into the wide world, which is, of course, a tragedy.
I'm wondering, did Walt Whitman have any interaction with Mark Twain? They were
No.
No, none at all.
No.
Okay,
Sadly, no. Among his contemporaries, I'm not sure he had any interactions.
yeah.
We've talked about among ourselves and elsewhere. What about Emily Dickinson? They're very, and Herman Melville. They're very much contemporaries. There's nothing in Whitman that suggests,
Yeah.
or in any historical record, he was alone out there.
Because they were
And-
both in their own way very avant-garde in American literature.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes.
I just wonder, since the book kept expanding and expanding, when you buy a copy now, Amazon or whatever.
If you go into Barnes and Noble, you'll see a paperback of the huge final edition, 800 pages. It's a beast. I mean, it would take a lifetime to read. And some of the poetry is not as good as, others. But there are shorter editions. There is, I believe, an edition of this very first self-published work by Penguin or somebody. If you go in and look at what's available for Whitman, you'll see a variety. I don't recommend the big long one unless, wow, you really want to delve in.
Go ahead.
I'd have to think about that. I'm not sure.
The question was, which do you recommend?
I said I'd have to think about that. I'm really not sure.
I did a little Wikipedia. Okay, I did a little Wikipedia search on Walt Whitman before coming to this. Could you comment on, I think it's the Free Soil Society?
No, I can't. Whatever I said would be probably not very accurate. The Free Soil Society. I suspect it was an early movement among the people, maybe somewhat socialist, but I don't know.
As I understood it from Wikipedia, it was something to do with slavery and
really?
abolition movement. Now, it just prompted me to question what that was all about. I knew nothing about his involvement with that, so just thought I'd ask.
There's not much evidence that he was an active abolitionist, for what that's worth.
Sounds a little like 40 acres and a mule, free soil. Was he in any sense religious?
He probably had a pretty strong Quaker strain, which he would have got from his mother. And I think it was the strain of kind of laissez-faire. Your soul is what matters. What you worship, who you worship, if you don't worship is secondary. There was nobody in his family who was an avid religious Christian. So he really didn't have that strain.
Do we have any other questions?
Over here.
Oh, over here. Okay.
Did you detect any difference in his writing after Ed passed?
That's a really interesting question. His writing changed through his life. It became more verbose. Some of the poems not included in here are quite lengthy and not really as sharp as his early ones. Let's say, Ed died in 1865. No, I guess I detected changes, but none I could connect up with the fact of losing Ed.
You mentioned that his notoriety as a poet wasn't discovered until actually he died. I'm wondering how he financed all of his travels.
Yeah, he traveled on the cheap, I'm sure. Money never interested him. And no, he became well known during his lifetime. That's how Oscar Wilde knew about him, for example. Probably 10 years before he died, suddenly his work caught on and became really well known. Did he know he was a national treasure at that point? I don't know. If he had, it probably wouldn't have mattered that much. But I do know that later in the 20s and 30s, Ezra Pound, the American poet, and his generation was very taken with Whitman, thought he was, I hate to say this, but not up to their standard. In fact, Pound has this line, "Okay, Walt Whitman, I'll make a pact with you. You cut the rough wood. Now is the time for carving."
Oh.
So that kind of says volumes. Yeah.
Says something about
So
Pound.
my question has to do with his romantic involvements. Did he have any that he wrote about?
No, not specifically. But that period when he's in Manhattan, strolling around with his floppy hat, going to the opera, the rumor was that he loved coachmen. Coachmen, young men who drove coaches. That was his specialty. He was probably fairly promiscuous at that time. If you read it, it sounds like he's probably bisexual, lover of men and women. I'm not sure if he throws in the women to whitewash a thing. Would he even care? Maybe he was. Certainly later in life, no, we have no idea what he was about, but he was an earthy guy. And he uses the word chaste at one point, and I almost think that should be in quotes because that's not
Like he was chased, right? Like
Yeah.
chase.
yeah.
Ginny here.
I have a question, and it might have been asked while I excuse myself, but when did he become internationally known? You said he had never gone to Europe
Right.
or traveled abroad.
Well, his books made it over there, and that would have been fairly late. As I said, Oscar Wilde knew of him, in the 10 years before he died. So, yeah, he was known there, and here. Journals, magazines, newspapers, there's pieces about him. This poet, who is he? He still was confusing a lot of people with his work. That's the best answer I have.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sharon, David, Jeff. Thanks for the Walt
Thank
Whitman.
you.
We want to thank you also for joining us here at Sunday
Good job.
Symposium, and we hope to see you bright and early next Sunday for David McEwen.